Well, hello, and welcome to episode 98 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, today is a special day. It is October the 13th, Thursday the 13th, and we're going to be talking about a fantastic film from the past, Friday the 13th. But before we get into all that, how are you doing? Are you getting caught up on your Halloween scary movie watches?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scary movies coming out this that came out this month. We had Hocus Pocus 2, which we covered last week. We had
Hmm.
the Hulu's Hellraiser, which is very scary if you're a Hellraiser fan. This that definitely delivered the creep factor for me. Um, there's a whole bunch of really interesting true crime stuff that's actually to me even more scary than some of the ghost spooky
Yes.
kooky stuff. Yeah, I'm into all the things spooky this week, and I feel like I've just started really hitting my stride because it's the second week in October. It's just going to go downhill from here. It's going to be amazing. What about you? What are you watching?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It is a spooky time of the year. We've already been into the spooky films here on the podcast, and we've got quite a few more to get into. Yeah, definitely want to check out the Hellraiser. Been watching some spooky stuff. My wife and I are nearly finished with the Jeffrey Dahmer show that's on Netflix that Evan Peters is in. It's real. It's very good. It's real disturbing, and real upsetting and unsettling. So, heed your own caution if you decide to watch that. Now, that story is one that we were. I don't want to speak for you, but I was kind of like orbitally familiar with because this takes place in the late 80s, early 90s. So I was old
Mm.
enough to know of the story, but not really old enough to kind of comprehend what any of it was. So it's interesting to kind of go back to that part of like my childhood, I guess, and learn more about it now as an adult and kind of how all of that stuff went down. But yeah, it's really good and it's definitely worth watching if true crime and scary
Yeah.
stuff is up your alley for sure.
Yeah, I started the series and I've not finished it yet. It is very hard to watch because it is so true to form. And if any of you don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer was, maybe look him up before jumping into this film or this series. Just about the most horrible person to ever have lived, perhaps. I don't know.
Mm.
I mean, there's a bunch of calls there that could be made, I suppose, but he's pretty awful. He's the serial killer, and I am fascinated by all things true crime. So I have a very dark fascination with all of that. Um, and so I knew who he was, but I had seen some dramatizations that have been done in the past.
Hmm.
But this one, even just a couple episodes in, it really hits. I think it fires on all the acting cylinders. Evan Peters is truly disturbing. He's so good and it's so awful. And yeah, it's really important, I think, for people to see because I think this is a crime that people don't know a lot about, especially now.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things that went into what happened and why it was so awful. I mean, obviously, serial killers are awful, but there was a lot of other things that happen around that make it more layered of a story than just what you might think. So I'm glad you're watching it, and I hope other people do. But it's not for kids. Definitely not for kids. And maybe check out the storyline before you get into
Yeah,
it because
it is.
I find it very triggering for some folks.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely not for kids, and it might not be for all adults. So, yeah, definitely use your own caution there. But, Michaela, what we've got going on today? We are going back to a classic. It is Halloween time. It is one of the classic spooky stories. One I definitely remember from my childhood. So, we're going to have to take a quick break so we can go back in time to Cramp Crystal Lake and whip up a really delicious cocktail to go with this week's film. So, we will be right back.
So this week's cocktail comes from the Drunken Moogle blog. The recipe is actually from Secret of the Booze, which we use a lot. We love them. Secret of the Booze, you
Hmm.
guys
Hmm.
rock. You guys
Yeah.
have a lot of fun cocktails. And this drink pays homage to Camp Crystal Lake, aka Camp Blood.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm very excited when you pointed out this recipe because it comes from Drunken Moogle blog, and a Moogle is, as everyone knows, from the Final Fantasy world of video games. So that's pretty cool. A wink and a nod to any Final Fantasy fans out there. But yeah, we've done a lot of Secret of the Booze things because they always seem to do the right things. They pick all the right movies and they make all the tastiest cocktails. And we're about those two things, right? Movies and cocktails. So yeah, Camp Crystal Lake. This is a pretty fun one. It's kind of theatrical in the way that you present it, but it comes together very easily and very cool if you want to impress your friends with your cocktail mixing and your movie knowledge.
That's true. And it's only three ingredients.
Yeah,
Super easy.
only three ingredients. Absolutely.
It's
So what you're going to do is you're going to take a tall, like a shooter sized shot glass. You're going to fill that halfway up with vodka of your choice. You're going to fill the other half of it up with Rumchata, and then you're going to take a like rocks glass, and you're going to put that upside down on top of the shooter shot glass, and then you're going to flip the whole thing upside down. So you have all that liquid kind of suspended in midair up against the bottom of your cocktail glass there. And check out the website and the social media. We will definitely get a picture of how we did that mostly successfully. There were a couple fails in there, but not too bad. But you're going to get that shot glass. You're going to invert it upside down, and it's going to be there. And what you're going to do is you're going to fill that cocktail glass up with 2 ounces of blue raspberry mix or blue curacao, which is what we ended up using. So basically just something blue that you want to have in your cocktail glass. And then you're going to wait for the crimes to be committed.
Whatever that sound is. I mean, I think that's what we're waiting for.
Very creepy. That was, yeah, you're going to wait for Michaela to make some creepy sounds. You're going to wait and see what happens. But then you're going to pull that shot glass out of there. The Rumchata and vodka is going to go down. It's going to mix into this cloudy blue oblivion in your glass. It is really fun to do. It is really fun to look at. And it's really fun to drink.
It is really fun to drink. So this isn't a shot. Just so everybody knows, we use a shot glass in it, but it's too much liquid for you to like shoot down. So, I mean, unless you have like a very giant kind of gullet and can do this in one go, it's more than that. So it's definitely something that I enjoyed sipping. It's really fun to kind of do. It's great at parties. I would imagine this would be fun at like the next Friday the 13th movie that comes out if there's like a showing, or if you're gonna have a Halloween party. This is definitely Camp Blood, Camp Crystal Lake. It's very blue. I like it.
It's very crystal. It's very blue. Yeah, it is. It's pretty good. I will say after we kind of did the theatrical bits of it, I did throw an ice cube or two into ours just to water it down just a touch. I think that kind of helped, kind of thin out the blue curacao that we used. Your mileage may vary. It probably depends on exactly what blue curacao or what blue raspberry mix you end up using. So just keep that in mind. And this is the second year in a row we've done a slasher. Last year, episode 45, Michaela, we talked about Michael Myers and Halloween. And then this movie, Friday the 13th, takes a lot of cues from Mr. Michael Myers, and it takes cues in the cocktail because that one also included Rumchata. So I guess Rumchata is really the flavor sensation of the season.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, and Rumchata is a fairly new liqueur. I want to say, I don't think it's been around for dozens and dozens of years. I remember it being a real big deal when I was in college. I think that's when it kind of became really prominent. Perhaps I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, I'm sure our drinky movie folks will tell us and be like, it came out in August of 1976. But I'm thinking that Rumchata is fairly new. And for those of you that don't know, it's basically rum and like this vanilla creamy kind of concoction. So the blue that it creates is like a light crystal blue color. With the vodka, it adds kind of an extra dimension because it's kind of got rum in it anyway. But I don't know. I liked this. I thought it was a little sweet because I'm not a huge curacao fan, and so again, as you said, your mileage will vary, but it's worth trying. I think everybody should try it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone wondering at home, Rumchata debuted in 2009, so Michaela was not far off there. So
I was right. Wow.
Yes. So take that. That is your history bit for today. So, Michaela, we have these mixed up. We are going back to Camp Crystal Lake. We are going back to 1980, and we are going to be talking about one of the most classic of slashers, one of the most influential of slashers of them all, Friday the 13th. We'll be right back.
Spoiler warning for Friday the 13th. If you've not yet seen this film, spoiler warning, it happens on Friday the 13th. And a lot of other horrible things happen. And we're going to find out who did all the horrible things. And that's kind of a big deal. So we're going to talk about all of it. If you don't want to know those things, please stop what you're doing right now. Go make yourself a Camp Crystal Lake cocktail. Go watch the original Friday the 13th. And then come back because we're going to chat about it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've not seen Friday the 13th, then you have no business in getting into these Halloween films because this is one of the classics of classic Halloween movies. This came out in 1980. It was directed by Sean S. Cunningham, and it stars Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees and a whole bunch of camp counselors that are, they're busy trying to get the Camp Crystal Lake reopened or trying to get busy, trying to get busy, clowning around is what they're really doing. But yeah, this was a pretty big deal back in 1980. Michaela, let's get into this one.
Yeah. So the film starts on a very dark night where there's moon. It's a full moon. It starts in 1958, which is a long time ago, and you got a bunch of camp counselors who are sitting around a fire in a kind of an old building. They're sitting around a fireplace and they're singing songs about Jesus or something. It's like they're singing a hallelujah song. And but these two, the girl who's strumming the guitar is making eyes at one of the guys who's looking at her strumming the guitar, and the song ends and they're done talking about Jesus, and they decide to go into another room and
That's
do
right.
something else.
The looks that they're giving during that song could only lead to one thing, and that thing is going to be going on upstairs in the like loft area of this. I think they didn't even like leave the room; they just went upstairs. But they're up there. They are beginning to get a little bit intimate. But bad news because then we're going to see kind of a first person perspective of our killer. It's going to be taking out these two. It is very scary. It is very traumatic, and that is how our movie is going to get started. We're going to get a tiniest little Friday the 13th in the bottom right hand corner. It's going to fly up big and crash through the screen to let you know that you are in for a wild ride. And flash forward, we are going from 1958 all the way up to present day, which I guess is 1980 for the sake of this film. And we are going to be meeting up with Annie. Annie is on her way to Camp Crystal Lake. I guess the camp is reopening and she's trying to get there. She's going by foot. Annie couldn't get a ride, couldn't get a car, but she makes her way into town. She stops and asks a dog for help. The dog is no help, so she goes into the diner, says, "Hey everyone, how do I get to Camp Crystal Lake?" And it is a true record scratch moment. Everyone stops, music stops, people turn, look at her like she has three heads, and said, "Don't go there, don't do that."
Oh, yeah. They're like, and then this one guy from the very back is like, "Do not go to Camp Crystal Lake. You will all die. The devil is at Camp Crystal Lake. The place is cursed." And everyone's like, "Shut up, Bob." What is his name? It's not Bob.
It's Crazy Ralph.
Crazy Ralph.
He's the town crazy. Don't listen to him.
Yeah.
But here's a tip. If you ever find yourself in a horror film of your own life, if Crazy Ralph says something to you, heed Crazy Ralph's advice. Maybe he knows.
Just listen. I mean, it's worth saying, right? We make fun of scary movies all the time. They have a franchise called Scary Movie. This is one of the films that started it all, right? This and Halloween. They've got all the creep stuff that happens, right? The stuff that we love to make fun of, right? Where you're like, don't be a virgin, because if you're a virgin, you're going to survive. That happens. You're good to go. And it's in movies like this. So yes, if Crazy Ralph tells you, don't go down that alley, it's haunted. Just listen. But Annie Phillips does not listen. She gets a ride from a truck driver. His name is Enos, which is a very interesting name. And the truck driver he's nice enough. He helps her get in the truck, and he talks to her and tells her all the stories about how, 20 years ago there was a murder and this double murder, and that's, I guess, what we saw from the killer's perspective at the opening scene. And then he says,
Hmm.
the year before that, a little boy drowned. Like, it's just cursed. Like, nothing good happens there. And we've been trying to tell Steve Christie, he is this guy who bought the land and he's been fixing it up for the last year. And we've been trying to tell him he really just needs to leave well enough alone, but he doesn't listen. And Crazy Ralph, he's harmless enough. And Annie Phillips is like, yeah, that's cool, man. I'm just here for a job, and I'm going to do a job, and I'm going to cook for a bunch of kids, and it's going to be fine.
It's
And
going to
he's like,
be
ah,
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. Yeah, the truck driver there, he says, Camp Crystal Lake, that's like 20 miles away. I can take you like half of the way there. Which I guess that's half thank you for that. So he does. He takes her, he drops her off to go the rest of the way. So she is there on foot. So we're going to skip away from Annie for the time being, and we're going to go to Camp Crystal Lake, and we're going to see Steve Christie, as you mentioned, who's played by Peter Brower, and we're going to meet up with the rest of the camp counselors. So, who do we have there? We have Ned, we have Marcy and Jack, we have Alice, we have Bill and Brenda. So, we have like these 6 kids, 3 guys, 3 girls, perfect ratio for your time at the summer camp as camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake. They're trying to get this place fixed up. They're doing some painting, they're setting up the archery range, they're shooting arrows at each other, which seems like a bad idea. Even if you're a really good shot at an arrow, don't do that at home, kids.
yeah,
But
that's a bad idea.
it's you're just seeing these kids clown around, and one of these kids, Jack, that's Kevin Bacon. He wasn't
Kevin
Kevin Bacon
Bacon,
yet. I mean, he was Kevin Bacon, but he wasn't, the Kevin Bacon quite yet.
right? This was way before 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. This his first film? I mean, he does Footloose like 4 years later, but I think this might be one of his first films. I remember seeing this and freaking out because I could not believe that it was actually the Kevin Bacon that we all know and love. That he started his career in a giant slasher flick.
Yeah, it was one of his very first things. He was in National Lampoon's Animal House. Then he did some a couple of TV things, but yeah, this was just a couple acting credits in for him. But yeah, and obviously he went on to have a really great career. So yeah, when you see him there, you're like, oh my gosh, it's young Kevin Bacon. But yeah, we're meeting these kids. Like I said, they're clowning around. They are trying to get this camp set up. They're doing a lot of flirting, not a lot of working. And Steve Christie says, you know what, kids, I gotta go into town, pick up some stuff. Bad storm's coming in, so get whatever you can get done before the storm comes. I'll be right back after lunch, which is a lie because he doesn't get back until like late at night. But whatever, Steve Christie, that's okay. I digress. So we got the kids. They're running around. They're getting stuff put together. But storm's rolling in. Looks bad.
It looks real bad. And so, of course, Jack and I think Marcy, they're a couple. It's kind of weird because no, I don't know if anybody's actually a couple. They're all just kind of there seeing what sticks or who sticks to who.
Summer camp rules,
right?
Summer camp rules, I guess.
Yeah. So Ned is played by Mark Nelson. He is kind of into one of the girls. I don't know if it's Alice or Marcy or Brenda. I think he's into Brenda, and she's not interested in him at all. But Jack and Marcy, they're getting it on. They're really getting along beautifully. So it's starting to rain. They go back to, I guess, Marcy's dorm, and they do their thing. It's very 1980s. I mean, I would say that it's not for kids, but it's not as adults as you would think. Maybe. I mean,
it's not for kids. It's not for kids because there's murder. It's not for kids because Marcy and Jack are doing whatever they're doing in the camp. And kind of in the background of all of this, you're seeing like some first person perspective. And every time you're seeing the first person perspective, the music's coming in, which is kind of one of the really cool things that they did. A lot of this film was kind of based off of what the Halloween franchise did, in the way that it utilized music. This one's utilizing music kind of in its own way, where it's only playing music when you're really seeing things from the perspective of the killer of this person. So you're seeing kind of like this like stalkerish vibes that you're getting from the killer, kind of watching these camp counselors from the side. We're going to go check back in with Annie, who's trying to walk her way to camp. She's hitchhiking as this Jeep pulls up, and you're getting kind of this first person perspective on Annie talking to her. But then, Annie thinks something's up, jumps out of the Jeep and is running through the woods. And that's kind of our first kill of this thing. Annie, jumps out of the Jeep and she's, kind of lumbering through the woods, probably rolled your ankle jumping out of a Jeep. And you get that first person's perspective of that first kind of slash there. Annie doesn't make it to camp. Annie doesn't make it. She is not long for the world. And our camp counselors are not long for the world either, Michaela.
Yeah, no, I will say that the special effects of the blood and gore is actually pretty good because it's not overdone, but it's shocking. And I know that was one of the things that Sean S. Cunningham had said. He really wanted to create a shocking, kind of visually stunning, boo gotcha, jump out of your seat kind of show. And he definitely did that. Even watching it today with the whole Ned Marcy thing. So Ned Marcy, they finish doing what they're doing in the bed, and then Marcy decides to go up and go to the bathroom. The killer, you see this first person kind of following her and watching her, and slams an axe into her face, and that's very shocking. It's very well done considering that it's older than us. As far as the first as the special effects go, and then poor Jack is just laying there in his own, because I guess the bathroom is in a different building completely. It's kind of like the outhouse room. And so Jack is laying there and he's waiting for Marcy to come back. And he gets killed. He gets like this weird like arrow pierced through the back of his neck. And again, it's very shocking. It's more about the shock of it than the gore of it, which is nice, even though it's bloody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The kind of the makeup and the special effects on this are really cool, and they really, kind of hold up. And yeah, that one in particular, Jack, is laying in bed and that arrow kind of comes up through in behind him. So, it's really interesting to think of how, logistically they would have made this work for this movie. But yeah, Ned, he was out there, he was pining away kind of for Marcy, left on his own. He meets his untimely end, and then you had Marcy and Jack, who had just been doing what couples do, I guess, in their cabin, and they both meet their end, which leaves Bill and Brenda and Alice, they're back at kind of like the main hub. They're hanging out, they're playing strip Monopoly, they're drinking beers, they're looking for some recreational things that you might smoke if you're so inclined to be doing that. And they're just having a good time. They know that Marcy and Jack, they're off on their own. They don't know, they don't really care what Ned's doing. Ned was a bit of a screwball, so they're just kind of hanging out, having a good time. But then, Brenda decides, oh man, storm's coming in, I gotta go check my window. So she's going to go back to her kind of cabin, I guess it is, which is bad news. Brenda not going to make it past that.
It's so funny because she's playing strip poker and she puts on like a jacket, a rain jacket, rather than putting her regular clothes back on to go back and check on her windows in her room. Yeah. She checks on the windows in her room, and then she gets into this very long, very like Handmaid's Tale kind of very, very white, kind of long, nightingale nightgown. Like it's very
that's
very,
right.
very prim and proper. And she gets into bed, but she's hearing weird things, which I love the sound effects.
Yeah, it's hilarious, right? They're playing strip Monopoly, and then she's like, oh, I gotta go close my windows. But instead of just putting her clothes back on, she just puts a rain jacket on like over her underwear, and goes back. And then she's wearing that nightgown, and she's laying in bed. She hears some weird stuff. She's not going to be long for the world, which leaves, we're down to two. We're down to two already, Michaela. We are moving through these camp counselors pretty quick. But before we check in on the last ones, we got to go find out what Steve Christie's up to. He's in this diner. He's chatting it up with the locals there. Seems like he's having a perfectly fine time. Like I said, he was supposed to be back just after lunch or something, or just before lunch. I don't know, but I don't know. It looks like it's like 4 a.m. It is dark. It is rainy. It is stormy. He decides to leave, but bad news. His Jeep gets stuck in the mud. He has to get a escort in from the police. But the police, they don't no one in this town will drive you as far as you need to go. You just have to get out and walk. And what happens when you get out and walk? Well, you get stabbed by the first person perspective here. So we're going to get another killing here on the Friday the 13th docket, and that is Steve Christie doesn't make it back either.
Yeah, they're coming down like flies at this point. But right. It's important to say Steve recognizes whoever it is that's stabbing him to death, which is
Mm,
interesting because he,
plot twist.
whoever this person is, was in a Jeep that looked just like Steve Christie's. So at the beginning of the film, I was led to believe that it might even be Steve Christie, that for whatever reason, he wanted to kill Annie as she was driving in, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but you don't really know what you're looking at because that's the scene that you're given, right? So when
That's
Steve
right.
turns and he looks at whoever it is in first person, is like, hey, oh, I'm so glad it's you. And then this unseen killer stabs him to death. You're like, wait a minute, who is it actually then? Bum, bum, bum. And
Bum, bum,
we've
bum.
only got
Yeah.
two people left because Ned is also dead.
That's right. Yeah, Ned died. He was in the bunk bed up above Marcy and Jack, which is pretty gross. And then yeah, we've got Bill and we've got Alice left. So Bill's going to go. He's out to check on the generator. The generator has been shut off or ran out of gas. He's going to find it. It's pretty creepy because he ends up going onto like the archery range and all of the floodlights flip back on. You think maybe some arrows are going to come his way, but they don't. We don't see that. We don't know what happens to Bill until Alice is going to have to go out and look for him. You know, Bill doesn't come back, so she's going to check, and she finds Bill. And some arrows did end up coming into poor Bill as he is hung up on the door of I don't know, kind of this other main building, which leaves Alice. She is our lone survivor. She's going to go back to her room, try to barricade herself in there. She hides in the pantry. I really like this scene actually because it's very creepy. She's in this pantry and it's this old like cabin, so it's like this wooden slat door, and you have like the lights coming through these slats, and they're hitting her kind of just so it looks really awesome. But of course, the killer is going to be like, "What is this locked door? Maybe I should check behind that." And of course, that's where Alice is. But Alice kind of gets the one up and gets out of there.
That's right. She's running through the kind of outside wood. She has to unbarricade the door after we spent like 5 minutes watching her like completely barricade the door of the
Yep.
cabin. Now she's unbarricading it frantically, trying to get out. She does get out, and a vehicle pulls up, and she's so excited because it is Steve's vehicle. It looks just like his Jeep, and she's thinking that it is Steve, but it is not Steve. It's an older lady who, if you'll remember, was in the diner when Annie Phillips went in looking for a ride. And
Yeah. Yeah,
she's
that's
like,
right.
hi. And of course, Alice doesn't know who this woman is, but she's a very nice looking old lady. She's got like a sweater on and pants. She says, hi, I was just checking to make sure you guys are okay. My name is Mrs. Voorhees. I'm a friend of Steve and the family. And of course, Alice is like, oh my God, everyone's dead. And she's trying to explain it. And Mrs. Voorhees is like, calm down, just take a deep breath. And of course, being in this situation, you just want to get out. And so she's hysterical. And then it kind
Yeah.
of gets strange.
That's right. So yeah, Mrs. Voorhees shows up. They go back into the back into her sort of cabin. She shows her the body of Brenda laying there, and it's kind of at this point that Mrs. Voorhees starts to tell the story about Jason was here at this camp and he drowned, and no one cared because the camp counselors weren't paying attention, and they were off doing naughty things and listening to music and doing drugs and not paying attention to poor little Jason, and Jason drowned. So what would Jason have me do but to get vengeance for him? So we find out that our killer wasn't Jason this whole time. It was his mom, Mrs. Voorhees, played by Betsy Palmer. And she's awesome. And pursuit takes place. That's kind of when this scene in the pantry happens, as I talked about there for a bit. And it ends up kind of getting back outside, and we end up alongside of Camp Crystal Lake, of the Crystal Lake. You have the moon shining bright. There's a canoe there. Alice is trying to get into the canoe to get away, but Mrs. Voorhees is there, kind of has one last ditch effort. But luckily for Alice, she's able to get the one up one last time and sail away to safety, I guess.
Yeah. Except when, she's able to sail away after she uses a machete, which we had seen earlier. So it's not like it comes out of thin air, but we'd seen this machete. Alice again fights Mrs. Voorhees off and then ends up decapitating Mrs. Voorhees.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very shocking scene. Again, it's more shocking than it is gory. And I love the angle with which they do that, because having not seen this in a million years, if ever, just for the sake of this podcast, I shrieked when she finally did it, because you're so hoping that she gets away, that somebody gets away from this, because nobody had been able to. And
Yeah.
so Alice ends up boarding the canoe, and she doesn't have any paddles. She just gets out in the middle of the water, which I was a little concerned with, and she just kind of gets into the middle of the lake and waits for someone to save her, because everyone is dead.
Everyone is dead, and she is just floating away out there. It's actually a very beautiful shot. If you see kind of just like the still images of this, or this picture is on a lot of the like the promotional stuff in the movie posters and stuff, but it's Alice kind of slumped over the side of this canoe on Camp Crystal Lake, and you have kind of the fall foliage, which is kind of contrasting what time of year maybe this was supposed to have been in, but it looks amazing, and you get kind of the mirror image there on the lake, and you get a couple of police officers finally pull in, and they call out to her, but then at the very last second, you see this I don't know, kind of mangled up little kid-sized person just kind of shoot up out of the water and pull Alice back in, to which she screams and wakes up in the hospital. So Alice might be okay, probably a wee bit traumatized, I would guess. I don't know how well we dealt with that in the 80s, but she's going to be okay. But she's very concerned that Jason is still out there in the lake. Did you find Jason?
Yeah, she's very concerned when they kind of rouse her, and they're like, hey, we found you in the middle of the lake. The police guy who, was too busy to take Steve Christie all the way right into the camp, and so it's probably his fault that the last three of them are dead, but whatever. He's like, yeah, we thought you were dead too, but turns out you're not dead, and that's really great. And then of course Alice is just like, where's Jason? Did you find the little boy? And they're like, what are you talking about? And so then there's a really creepy close up of her face where she just then looks distraught and kind of straight angles at the camera and says, well, then he's still out there. And then you see this super creepy kind of film where it fades into the lake, and it's shown with ripples in the water and like little bubbles that are coming up.
Bubbles coming up, yeah.
Oh, creepy.
Yeah, very, very, very creepy stuff. And then, yeah, that's kind of where it ends. It's very, very ominous, and you think that there's probably going to be more of Jason's stories to be told. And spoiler, there definitely are that. So that is Friday the 13th. We kind of ran through it pretty quick, but there's not a lot going on. It's basically kind of these are the kids at the camp, and then they all get murdered. But this is very culturally, I don't know if culturally, but kind of in the realm of like horror films. So Friday the 13th was pretty significant. Like I mentioned, it drew a lot of inspiration from Halloween, which came out in 1978. To kind of tell this story. But this one was really interesting in a couple of facets. In Halloween, we're seeing Michael Myers as like this boogeyman character, and we're getting images of him. But in this one, we're seeing our killer. It's all in the first person's perspective from the killer. We don't actually see the killer until it's revealed to be Mrs. Voorhees at the end, which, neither of us saw this in 1980, but I have to imagine that people that saw this in 1980 were like, it's like this old lady, that's who's killing these people. Mind blown
For sure. I mean, she's got this cropped hair, it's very like, it really does remind me of like my mom or my aunt in like 1980 chic, right? She's got this long, sweater. She looks very well put together. She's got like iridescent lip gloss on. Like, she is very stylish for 1980, but she's also very deadly. And the fact that she kind of loses it, she's so understated. Betsy Palmer is amazing in this, because she's not over the top, and she comes from a theater background, and so there's a great story about how she and Alice had to fight, and Betsy actually slaps Alice, and Alice's character, Adrienne King, is like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I had to hit you in the scene. And so the director had to be like, no, we don't actually do that in film. We can miss them, and that's why we're going to do that. But she it's very understated, and her telling the story of how her son drowned is
Hmm.
also kind of painful, because she's like, I trusted these kids and you did nothing. They did nothing. They were doing all these other things, and I am going to get, I'm, but she feels like her son is still speaking to her, and that's even creepy when she like makes his
Yeah.
voice. It's but it's not over the top. I think that in the next film of Friday the 13th and the next eight that follow, it just gets more and more over the top. But the first
Yeah.
one, I think one of the things that really sets it and why it was so wildly popular was because it was terrifying, but also not, it was not, they took it so seriously that it wasn't they weren't a farce that wasn't farcical, you know what I mean?
Right. Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there was a level of like realism, I guess, to it, which would have really drawn on that, before obviously you get into the sequels, which get a little bit more kind of supernatural and things like that. And yeah, you one of the things you talked about there, Michaela, is kind of this bait and switch, right? Because we see Annie, who's hitchhiking, she gets picked up by that Jeep, which is the same Jeep that we saw Steve Christie in. The only difference is it has the top one. Now, I don't know if that was actually like a choice that they made as kind of this kind of like bait and switch kind of a thing, or if that was just a um, something a kind of side effect of having this really low budget of like
Mm-hmm.
$500,000 where they just didn't have the money to get another car. So it just happened to work out perfectly. I don't know which way that was, but it did, because you don't know who it is. You think that this whole time that she got picked up by Steve, but really it was the killer. So there's a lot of stuff like that in this, which is really kind of amazing, and really kind of set the tone for the way the slashers and horror films were going to go forward for a long time, even to today. And speaking of today, we're still getting Jason films. Well, I guess the last one was in 2009, so it's been a little bit of time now. But 12, there's been 12 Friday the 13th now,
There's been
which
12.
which is a lot, I think.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's absolutely. It's a lot of that sounds. And we have to talk about this because you're making fun of me earlier because you were like, I don't remember that in the film, but I guarantee it was there. Harry Manfredini was the guy who did the musical score.
Mm, hmm,
And
hmm,
it's this is so interesting to me because this film used a lot, took a lot of inspiration from films that we've covered, like Halloween, right? Like Jaws, because it wasn't until almost three-quarters of the way through the film that we actually see Jaws. Same thing with when we see Mrs. Voorhees. We actually don't see her until the end, and where we realize that she is the killer. And the music choices that Harry Manfredini said, he took a lot of inspiration from John Williams.
hmm.
And I thought that there were a lot of influences from the film Psycho as well around the score, just because there
Hmm.
was a lot of strings at very high. I'm going to sound like an idiot here because I don't know music very well, but the strings were very high, like the, but not quite like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that there are very similar sound groupings that definitely had like striking pronunciations that made it even more scary as you're like running away from this unknown person with an axe.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of just kind of dissonant tones that really played on that musical motif, I guess. One of the other things that people think about when you think about Friday the 13th, you think about Jason Voorhees and his hockey mask. He actually doesn't get his hockey mask until Friday the 13th, part three, which came out only 2 years after this one. So this one did so well. Like I said, is just over $500,000 on the budget. It made $40 million domestically, $60 million worldwide. That is a really good return on your money. So you're going to start cranking these things out. So the sequel came out the next year, and the third one came out the year after that. And then kind of you have that Jason. Voorhees and the Hockey Mask, 1982. You had Freddy come out in Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. So those two were kind of intrinsically linked in that time and space. You always get all this Freddy versus Jason stuff, which we actually got in a film later on. But, Friday the 13th really paved the way and was really kind of ahead of its time in the way that it told the story and the story that it told. So really creative stuff there and really great. It's one of the all-time classics for a reason. So if you've not watched it, go back, watch Halloween, watch these because they really set the foundation for things like Smile, I guess, that we're getting this week in the movie theater. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I now can say this is the first time I watched it all the way through that I remember. So I remember seeing bits and pieces of it, but I hadn't watched it, certainly not in its entirety until now. And I get it. I get why people liked it so much more than I did as a kid. As a kid, I think it just scared me to death.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let us know at home if you have checked out Friday the 13th or which one of the 12 installments is your favorite. Let us know what is your favorite slasher of them all. Is Jason the one? Is Freddy it? Is Michael Myers? Let us know. Let us know all of that stuff. Let us know if you make a Camp Crystal Lake. Take a picture of it. Take a video of it because it's really fun when you pull that shot glass out and those colors and flavors combine. It is really cool looking. We'll of course have pictures and videos of ours and share yours with us. You can do that on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Drink the Movies and on Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. If you want the recipe, pictures of ours, all that good stuff, episode recaps, all the other recipes that we've done for Halloween season, you can do that on our website, which is www.drinkthemovies.com. And if you make it out of Camp Crystal Lake alive, we would appreciate if you took a moment on your way out of town to drop by and leave us a review. Michaela, where can they do that?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, Stitcher, anywhere where Anchor podcasts are distributed. We are super excited about the community that y'all are building, talking about movies and cocktails and all things alcohol. If you leave us a 5-star review, it helps us get more Drink the Movie stuff out there. So we certainly appreciate that. We have 2 drops a week and they're a lot of fun. And we're just really excited to continue, especially the slasher film.
That's right, absolutely. And we talked a little bit, Michaela. So this week's slasher film had its basis in reality, but we're gonna have to go supernatural next week. So why don't we mix up another cocktail, and we're going to have to go find something in the vampire realm, maybe Lost Boys, to talk about next week. So grab the blue curacao, I'll grab the rumchata, and we'll talk to everyone next time on
Drink
Drink
the
the
Movies.
Movies.